Well, hello, and thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your interest in teaching at Anywhere School District. But before we begin, can you briefly introduce yourself and share what excites you about education?
Yeah, so my name is Isadora Cote. I'm from Lamona, Iowa, and I just finished my bachelor's degree for education. And with that, I am coming off of a student teaching experience where I was in first grade, and I actually ended up loving it. At the beginning, I kind of thought I would like older kids, but with that, I feel like after I've had the experience in the first grade classroom, I now have gained a really big appreciation for our young learners. And for me, I really want to inspire those young learners and take them wherever they are at in their educational journey. And I want to take them and further them in the right path. And I want to take them, again, at whatever level that they're at and just work on making them feel successful in whatever that is.
So our mission here is to ensure that all students demonstrate high levels of academic achievement in a culture that focuses on perseverance, respect, integrity, discipline, and enthusiasm. How do those traits align with your teaching philosophy?
Will you say that one more time?
Yes, so it's pride, perseverance,
Uh-huh.
respect, integrity, discipline, and enthusiasm. And let's just start with perseverance and the alignment with your philosophy.
So I would say with perseverance, that's a huge thing with what I align with and what I think our school should align with. Perseverance is basically just saying that you'll get back up again and continue trying, and that's part of education. Is you're gonna fail sometimes as a teacher, as colleagues, as kids. We're all gonna have fails, and with that, we can continue and push ourselves to learn what maybe are our strengths or some things that we have that we just need to improve on. And so for me, I want to help kids find that in themselves and find, okay, this might be my weaker spot, but that just means I can work harder at it to get to where it can be just as successful as another subject area that I'm really well versed in.
Awesome. We'll combine these next couple ones. What about respect and integrity? Sort of a synthesis between those two.
Yeah, I would say respect and integrity, I feel like is really big in our classroom and how we treat others and how we treat ourselves. And so being able to take responsibility for our own actions, be sure that I can implement that in our classroom with our kids, and just teaching them also how to be respectful human beings in the long run of everything. Because as much as, yes, we're in a school where we're supposed to be learning education and skills, we also can be learning behavioral skills and how to really help build our kids as human beings as they're going to get older and they're going to continue on learning things as they go.
Awesome. Let's talk about the last two, which is the discipline and enthusiasm ideas.
I would say with discipline, we need discipline obviously in our schools to make sure that our kids are on task and they are on track with what they need to do. But with that as well, I think that we need to include enthusiasm, because without that, school can be sometimes frustrating or just hard for some kids especially. And we want to be enthusiastic with our kids to make sure that they are having fun while learning, because learning should be fun. Learning is something where we're expanding ourselves and we're being creative, and that should be represented in the classroom.
Awesome. And so what inspired you to become an elementary teacher, and what motivates you to want to enter this profession?
Well, coming up to Graceland University, I first wanted to do nursing because I really cared for people and I wanted to just pursue that field. And then I quickly realized, and that maybe not as in for me. But then I went into education, and through that, again, I was kind of tiptoeing on if I wanted to continue doing it or if I wanted to go somewhere else. But after, it was really student teaching that brought me to where I was like, no, this is something I really would like to do. And I think that just with that, I have really seen, being in a classroom, I've been able to see that the care that I have for students and how much I really want them to get better every single day. And I think that it makes me a better person and it makes me reflect more on myself. And so with those two together, it really propels me to continue on to this journey.
Awesome. Can you describe a lesson that you've taught? What made it effective, and how did you engage your students?
Say that again.
A lesson that you have taught, like one of your favorites. What made it work well? How did you engage students?
I would say this isn't really like a big whole group lesson, but this was one of our centers we were doing. And again, at this time I wasn't full-time teaching, and so I was just kind of helping out. But I would say with that, our teacher had in place like addition and subtraction, not even subtraction, I don't even think. It was just addition problems for our kids to work on. And as I mentioned earlier, I've really seen the range in our students. So there's some students who are very, very high and some students who need a little bit more assistance. And so I had noticed after a few weeks of doing these centers that the kids who were really, really high weren't really getting what they needed. They weren't being challenged, they were just kind of getting bored and they were doing more work. So instead, I actually changed that, especially for a specific student of ours. So instead of him doing addition, I started him on subtraction to see if he could do that. And he flied through that. It was amazing. And then I was like, okay, I know you're only in first grade, but let's introduce multiplication. And so we introduced that, and he is actually really getting the hang of it. And I feel like he would come back to me every single day and be like, can we do more? Can we do more? And so I could see him, like, instead of being kind of like, whatever, more centers, he was very, like, excited to do them. And he would come up with, like, to me and always ask me to do more problems. So it's not necessarily a lesson, but that's something that I was really proud of myself, and the fact of that it wasn't even planned, but it was something that I quickly adjusted to and noticed that he needed a little bit more challenging. And so by doing that, I could do that for him, which is now pushing him further in his individual learning journey.
Awesome. Can you tell us on the opposite side, a lesson that you tried that maybe didn't go quite as you planned? What did you learn and how did you adjust?
I would definitely say math is a area that I need to improve on a little bit. I understand math really well, but it's sometimes hard to teach it for me. So with that, at first when I hit math, I kind of fumbled a little bit because they just weren't really getting it, and we also didn't have a lot of time to do whole group. We had a lot of like individual time to work on stuff, but our whole group lesson was kind of shortened. And so with that, I ended up using more of my resources. So I used my projector more, and I took away the projector some to do like hands-on writing, and I also helped myself out by asking them questions instead of just telling them, because at first I feel like I was trying to just feed them information by giving it to them, but then I realized after we would go to small groups that maybe they weren't actually understanding what I was saying, especially the people who are a little bit lower in that. And so instead of doing that, now I ask them questions, or I will even have them come up to the board and be examples for me to kind of get them hands-on with the learning and giving me feedback throughout the process.
Awesome. So we're going to put two sort of together. I want you to talk a little bit about how you differentiate instruction specifically towards assessment. So not only how you differentiate instruction, but also how you differentiate assessment to meet the needs of multiple learners.
Yeah, so I would say that with testing specifically, for those kids who are a little bit lower, we'll be sure that the questions are not too challenging for them, or like the words maybe aren't too challenging for them. And if so, I am very quick to come to them and make sure that I explain it to them and like work with their group specifically who are a little bit lower and maybe need some more help, to just be sure that they understand. So like for instance, if I am teaching like a writing lesson, maybe I will show the example and do it as like an I do, we do, you do model. And so we'll do it I'll do it together for the class to watch, and then together we'll do it all, and then I'll give them their own sheet of paper to work on it. But with those specific students who still kind of struggle, I'll be sure to like walk over to them and assist them through the process and maybe ask them questions to get them to maybe write what I'm looking for.
So we're going to talk about classroom management and student engagement now, but describe your classroom management style. Like, how do you create a safe and respectful and engaging learning environment?
Well, I think first is what we talked about with pride. Respect is huge in my room. We treat everybody nicely, and we all should be treated the same, which I think is huge. But with that as well, I think that with me, I quickly got to learn what my classroom management style would be, because my teacher's is definitely different than mine. She's a little bit more passive, and so with that I kind of learned that, maybe I can't allow for as much wiggles or all that kind of stuff, or we need to do wiggles in like a structured time, because it got them really off task sometimes and they wouldn't focus on what they were working on. And so with that, I feel like I implemented a behavior chart, so they got stickers whenever they were doing a good job, and so that really actually help them, especially with talking, because that was a big one for them, was that they really like to talk to their peers. And we actually started doing a hush puppy game where they have to be quiet, and they actually want to play it more than I want to play it now. And basically, for maybe 5 minutes or so while we're doing instruction, or when the classroom needs to be quiet and they need to be listening, we'll play hush puppies. And so if they do talk, then oops, they're out of the game. But then the people who do get they survive the round or whatever you want to say, they get a sticker. And so it kind of motivates the kids to work on their stickers, and then at the end of the week they get to go into the treasure box, and if they get to a certain number of stickers. So Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. The next question I'm going to ask is, what are the specific strategies that you use to promote like perseverance and a growth mindset within students to get that determination and will within them?
I think that with that, like I said earlier, everybody's going to be at a different level. Even if you're in the middle group, even if you're in the high group, even if you're in the low group, everybody is different and they have different skills in different subjects. And so, really, just working with kids one on one, especially when you have that like small center time, really working with them one on one to see where they're struggling and to see where they maybe could use some assistance, and then being able to foster that for them. And with that, like, trying to think. Read the letters again for me one more time.
Pride, Pride.
And what-
Perseverance, respect, integrity.
You're asking about all of those right now?
No, just the only ones I'm looking at right now are perseverance, which is
Perseverance.
not giving up, and then
Okay.
that growth mindset, which is aligned.
Growth mindset. That's what you said. Okay. Yes. So I think that basically with that, it's just that to convince them that they can move at their own pace, and that's okay, because again, there's students who are going to be lower and there's students that are going to be higher, and with that, like, we shouldn't put them in a box and like, oh, this is where you need to be or this is where you should be. By now, it's just I feel like the box should move with the student, if that makes sense. Like, they have their own individual box, and like, they get to build upon that as they can. And obviously we want to work with those who may need more assistance, and even those who are higher, and we need to work with them to continue their growing beyond whatever they need. But yeah, I guess trying to make a little box.
Real quickly, I'm going to touch on the Iowa Core Teaching Standards or 21st Century Skills.
Goodness.
And how do you align your instruction to the Iowa standards, and how do you structure everything to ensure that students are meeting grade level expectations?
Yeah, so actually we've worked with Iowa Core Standards a lot in college. So when we would make lesson plans, we would often have to put, we would have to put every single time an Iowa Core Standard that aligns with our lesson. So very familiar with them. And with that, I feel like with the teaching standards, specifically the first 10, those are also things that I've had to write about in the classroom. And so with that, being able to reflect on those and being able to work on those. Sorry, okay. Being able to work on those, and then specifically looking for what I need to be doing in the classroom to implement those, I have been able to, I don't even know what the question is anymore.
The Iowa Core Standards?
What's the question?
The Iowa Core, how do you use the Iowa Core Standards or the 21st Century Skills? You're doing fine.
I just don't even know how would you answer that?
We'll go over it.
Okay, I don't even know how to answer that.
Okay. Next one, we're going to talk about tech integration.
Okay.
Right? This
Oh,
one will
boy.
probably come up. And so it's very simple.
Mhm.
How do you integrate technology into your teaching to be an enhancement for student learning rather than a distraction?
I would say that it's kind of based on your students that you have, because again, like I said, sometimes I use a projector, sometimes I don't. And like, I could make technology a tool, but then sometimes it does become a distraction for them. So if it does start to become a distraction, usually I notice it in like specific like subjects. So again, like with math, like sometimes they wouldn't like fully comprehend what I was doing up there, but then when I wrote it and like had them write it with like an expo marker on the board, they like magically got the subject better. So I think especially towards the end of the day, being more hands-on with them is a little bit more effective. But at the beginning of the day, I feel like we use technology quite a bit to kind of wake up their brains. And so maybe they aren't super duper hands-on yet, but they're like kind of seeing things. And again, I feel like I use technology a lot to express the I do, we do model, because it projects it enough for the whole class to see. And then they can watch me do something, but then together we can work hands-on individually to be sure that it's not, the technology aspect of it isn't becoming a distraction, because there's often times where you have kids who they'll get on their computers but then they aren't actually getting onto the sites that you want them to get on. So with that, we just have to monitor those things and be sure that we are using them as a tool, and you remind your kids that we're using it as a tool to learn and to focus on what we need to do.
Awesome. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about your commitment to professional growth.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's sort of two questions embedded here. The first is, well, how do you stay up to date on the best practices in education? And the second is, how do you use that professional development opportunity to impact your teaching in a positive way?
Yeah, so I would say I definitely rely a lot on my colleagues, and I share ideas with other people. And specifically with me and my cooperating teachers, we're always bouncing ideas off of each other. And to stay up to date with things, I mean, I talk to other people and see what they're doing. I've also like looked things up on the internet on like, okay, what are some cool, fun, new lessons that we can do? You know, I don't want to give them, you know, worksheets every day or stuff like that. I want them to be able to be hands-on with their learning, and so with that, I feel like I'll go to a resource and find different things that I can use. I will go to other people to figure out what they're doing to see if maybe that would align with my classroom. So those are kind of how I find new and innovative ideas. Whereas I would say how I use them in the classroom, I go ahead and do the lessons with them, but then I also see how the students react to that. So if they react in a positive way to the learning, or maybe it may be something that we need to build upon, and so I have to explain it maybe more to them. So with those, I feel like kind of gauging where your kids are at and what they enjoy. For instance, like something that I do with our kids is I'll make presentations, but I will have like little funny like aspects to them or things that just relate to whatever we're talking about, but it'll keep them engaged. Whereas I feel like sometimes whenever I was in school, like we would just have the same old boring presentation where I would just fall asleep in the fact of like, I'm not really learning because I'm not interested in it. So kind of doing those things, or even like using like real life examples. I feel like they also really like that, is when you use real life examples, they can relate to the subjects and they can then move on and understand it better.
Awesome. And so for the last couple questions, I'm going to give you a situation or a scenario-based question, right? So let's suppose that you have a student who's struggling both academically and socially. What steps would you do to support them?
Yeah, so academically, obviously, we would want to see if where they're at in their learning journey. If they do qualify for maybe SPED or an IEP, I would definitely look into that, because I know, like within my experience, there are a few students in our classroom who need that additional support from somebody who's outside of our room. So I would check that, and then if they don't qualify for any of those, I would really just make sure that my lesson has an accommodation for them always, because again, like I said earlier, sometimes certain kids can't grasp the full message during our whole group time. And so that means whenever they come to a small group, their needs are very, very important. And so there I want to be sure that I'm hitting the things that they need and really talking with them and collaborating with them on ways that they learn best to help them in that. Now, socially, again, in our room, disrespect is not tolerated whatsoever. So they will not be doing anything disrespectful in our room. But sometimes when they go to recess or something like that, maybe kids aren't bonding socially with other kids. And so really building like team or partner activities will really help kind of group kids up. And also placing certain students together might be beneficial for some students versus maybe don't put obviously somebody who's struggling socially with somebody who's kind of a mean-spirited child, you know? So really trying to work on those things and building people together as well as building them academically.
Okay, so we only have 2 more questions left. The first one's sort of a little more challenging, but can you talk about a time that you had a disagreement with a colleague or an administrator, and how did you handle that?
I'm trying to think. I haven't had very many disagreements with at least in my student teaching journey. It's what I'm kind of reflecting on. I would say there's definitely times where maybe me and my cooperating teacher like have different opinions on things. And again, I would probably say the biggest thing that we've had like a differencing in opinions on is just like how we run the classroom. And again, like she's a little bit more flexible in the fact of like, how do I say this? She's a little bit more flexible in the fact of like she's very free and like lets the kids kind of do what they want to do, whereas I feel like sometimes they kind of need a little bit more structure. And so with that, I never wanted to step on her toes, and I didn't want to completely change her classroom or anything of that sort. And I feel like that kind of held me back for a few weeks. But then after a while, I kind of realized that this wasn't going to work with me, and that they're getting used to me being a teacher, and that's really a hard adjustment for them as well, especially being first graders. So I had a conversation with her about it, and I just said like, hey, like, I feel like I would never really say anything about her or like how she taught, but I just said like sometimes I don't feel like they're responding well for me. And with me being new here, they're kind of trying to act out a little bit more, and so I kind of went about it that way. And with that, I just had a conversation with her, and I said, what do you think would help? And I gave her some of my ideas. I said like the behavior chart. They didn't have the sticker chart before I came, and so I introduced that idea to her. I said, would you care if I did that? And she's like, oh no. And we get along super great, and so we're really well at collaborating with each other. And she even told me once, she's like, it's okay if your teaching style isn't exactly how my teaching style is. Like, that's okay. This is for you to learn and figure out. And so with that, I feel like I have, and from that conversation, I've now have been able to kind of grow and practice my own like style of teaching.
Awesome. And so the very last question is just pretty straightforward. Do you have any question about us, or is there anything that you want to know more about?
No, I'm just saying no for now. I'll think of one later.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, and we appreciate your responses.